Hello everybody and welcome to CaiKeys. Today I'm here with the Volvo 940, the incredible... You are? What do you mean? Oh, easy mistake. Today we're here with the Volvo 940, the incredible Swedish 7-seater estate. So today we're going to get it out on the road, we're going to have a drive, I'm going to try and fix the bonnet that I've just broken, and I'm going to tell you all about this car. So come on, let's take it out for a drive. So, oh, there's people in the road. Slow old people. So here we are behind the wheel of the Volvo 940, and this is not just any Volvo 940, this is a very special Volvo 940 because this used to be my Volvo 940. I bought this thing a few years ago, and essentially I bought it as a daily driver to get to and from work. This car replaced my BMW E39. It was a 2.5 litre straight six, and it was absolutely terrible. I did not really like that car whatsoever, and I decided let's get something a little bit more practical and genuinely something a little bit better on fuel. Now, when I'm saying that the Volvo 940 is better on fuel than an E39, that speaks volumes about how bad that E39 was. But I digress, I don't want to get too off topic. I bought this Volvo 940 sight unseen on eBay, and I think I paid about £1,300, £1,400. Didn't realise until I'd sent the money over that it was down in Devon, which is a few hundred miles away, and I had to arrange transport, which was an absolute rigmarole. But regardless, a while later, this thing rocked up at my door, and I jumped in and essentially fell in love with the car. It's excellent. It's a great car. At the time, it was the most practical vehicle that I'd ever owned, and we used that practicality. We would go on trips down to London, into Snowdonia. We'd go sleeping in this thing. There's videos and photos somewhere, which I'll put somewhere on the screen, of essentially in my bed setup. We would kip over in this, and it saved a fair bit of money in regards to obviously not having to purchase a hotel. You can see I've got these Velcro things up, which we designed blind and stuck them on. There's something brilliant about having an estate car like this. But anyway, the Volvo 940 was essentially a continuation of the Volvo 740, and the Volvo 740 was introduced in 1982 as a successor to the Volvo 200 series. Now, they didn't stop making the Volvo 200 series until the very early 90s. It must have been an absolutely antiquated piece of machinery by then, and I've always felt that it's weird that they continued what was essentially the same sized vehicle alongside a newer version. Something I can't really understand. This is a 1995 Volvo 940, and my God, it feels so old for a 1995 vehicle. That's not a particularly bad thing, but it certainly feels outdated for the era of the car. I owned a 1995 Peugeot 406, which felt like a spaceship in comparison to this. And I think that's a little bit of the Volvo stereotype. There's something simple, there's something reliable, there's something quite old-fashioned, and that's what you get in this thing. We've had absolutely no mechanical problems with this. So, why the 940?
Well, I know it's a bit of a weird choice, but there's a funny story of why I got it. So basically, before the 940, I had a Ford Street car, and then I sold that. That was worth about £1,000. Then about a week later, I passed my driving test first time. So, bit of awkward timing. So I'm looking at cheap cars, and the 940 comes up from this old guy, and it was previously Kai's car. So interesting. So, you know, bit of history to it. Selling it for about 700 or so quid. I thought, why the hell not? Why should I go for a boring generic car like a Toyota Aygo or a Citroen C1 when I can get this for the same price, if not cheaper, and in better condition? it's such an interesting car. So yeah, that's why I went for it. What I like about it the most is probably the practicality of it. It's very useful because I go uni, so it takes a lot of stuff, and when I go to uni I do put a lot of stuff in it. So it's got 7 seats, it's 5 meters long, you got loads of room, you got lots of hidden storage as well, so it's really useful in that way.
Well, why didn't you get a Toyota Yaris or an Aygo?
I don't want a car. Nothing like that has character to it at all. This has loads.
Reliability?
Oh, perfect. Nothing's gone wrong with it. The only thing that I can really say is an issue, well, apart from the tyres, which isn't even that bad of an issue because I can inflate them anyway, nothing.
Sunroof?
I mean, sunroof, yeah, a few minor faults, nothing major, so nothing too serious. So yeah, reliability is up there, up at the top.
Lovely.
Yeah.
You can see here one of the main issues of the Volvo 940, which is also one of the main benefits, is the fact that you've got this absolutely colossal engine bay. And that does have advantages. It's incredibly easy to work on. The engine bay just has acres and acres of room. So if you're purchasing a fairly simple car to learn the basics of mechanics, you can't really go too far wrong with one of these. One of the detriments of that, however, is the fact that you can't actually see out of junctions. But another positive of that is that if anyone smashes into the side of you, they're going to die. There's a big dent on the back of this car from when it reversed into an aircraft carrier. That aircraft carrier subsequently sunk. The fact of the matter is, there's a lot of stereotypes about these being built really solid, and they are. These are very solid cars, body-wise. These don't really seem to succumb to the elements all that much. Of course they rust, every car does, especially older cars, but the underneath of this thing is absolutely pristine. It's never been welded, it's never needed to have been welded, and it's not been undersealed at all. It's a really smart, sensible car. The red block engine in these, as I was saying about the turbos, they can be overboosted. You can pump the turbo pressure up and just make absolutely ridiculous horsepower figures out of these. It's not abnormal to see these go above 300 horsepower with very few internal modifications. Around 200 horsepower seems to be the sweet spot for modifying these. You know, it's a fair amount of power. This in its low pressure turbo form has approximately 130 brake horsepower. This car is stock, we've not had anything done to this, and to be fair, it's not too bad. Off the line it's not the fastest, and that's because you've got these really very long gear ratios, and this is an automatic, so you're not really going to have much fun throwing it through the gears. It's a nice cruiser. As far as performance goes, it's alright. You do have the opportunity to make massive amounts of speed by, of course, overboosting that turbo, or fitting an entirely new turbo if you want. There's an awful lot of aftermarket support for the 940 and the 740. The red block engine as a whole is essentially pretty legendary. But what does impress me with this car is just how refined it is. It's a 4-cylinder turbo petrol, so you'd expect it to be fairly decent, but it really is very cozy in here. Just surprising. As far as wind noise goes, it's nowhere near as bad as you'd think. On the motorway it can get slightly loud, but driving around town, I'm on a 30-mile-an-hour road here, and there's not really anything. The sunroof doesn't work particularly well, so there's more wind noise than there should generally be, but this is a very refined vehicle. Interior quality, I've got to say, is fairly decent. Volvo kind of fit into this weird sector of the market where they're not really what could be classed as luxury vehicles, especially at the time, but they had a certain prestige to them, and I think that's fair to say. The interior on this 940 isn't as nice as what you'd get in, say, a W124 or a 190. The quality's not as great, but it's very comfortable. Everything's fairly hard wearing. The only real interior problems you get with these cars is that the door cards will inevitably start kind of sagging and warping. It happens on all of them, and it's virtually impossible to find a Volvo which hasn't done that. But everything seems to wear fairly well in these things. They're good, honest cars. It's also a 7-seater, which is excellent. I've never actually used the third row of seats, but it does mean that if you're driving around and you need that extra practicality, provided that your friends are amputees, similar to the friends that I would have in the Nissan Micra review. You can chuck 2 people in the back of there, but the brilliant thing is they're also rear-facing seats, so you can kind of stare out the drivers behind you or make rude gestures, depending on how you feel about them. Regarding suspension, which is important in a car like this, because look, this car is 5 meters long. It's fairly heavy, although not as heavy as you may think, because it's an older car and you don't have all these heavy safety systems. The A-pillars are fairly thin. All the pillars on this car are fairly thin. You'd expect a car like this to be very wafty, like an old American station wagon, so you'd think it wouldn't really handle in the corners. And admittedly, there is a little bit too much body roll for my liking, and the ride height is slightly too high, but it is remarkably composed. It's rear-wheel drive, and there's absolutely no weight in the back of the thing, so you'd think that the rear axle would be kind of a little bit twitchy, but it's not. There's a good amount of control. If you do take it on a twisty country road at 60 miles per hour, there's perhaps slightly too much wobble, but there's an awful lot of feel from the back of the car. You can feel when you're going to break traction, and you never feel as though you're going to lose the back end. It is remarkably composed, and it's quite fun to take on a country road. There's a bit of footage of me sending it round a corner, and you can hear those rear tyres squeal, but I never lose grip. There's an awful lot of feedback from this car. This is an automatic, and as far as automatic boxes go, it is certainly based on comfort as opposed to performance. The gear ratios, as I previously said, are very, very long. It's not particularly the worst thing in the world though, because you can override this gearbox and just whack it into second gear. And if you do that, if you're on a windy country road, you typically won't need to change. Because the second gear ratio is so long, you will be able to hit 60 miles per hour in second gear. So it's not the end of the world. Of course you don't get that engaging fun. You can of course get these in manual if you prefer. It's a slush box really, it's not ideal. It's very comfort oriented. And when you're at 70 miles per hour, you're sitting at about 2,500 RPM. Speaking of sitting at that amount of RPM, that's also not too bad for the fuel economy. For a 2.3 litre fairly big car that's shaped like a brick, I was achieving on average about 27 miles per gallon. I'd get a low of about 24 and a high of about 30, so an average of about 27. And to be honest, if you're not doing mega miles, that's really not bad. I said I replaced my old E39 with this car because of the miles per gallon, and I was getting about 15 in that thing. I couldn't break 20 miles per gallon no matter how hard I tried, and it wasn't a nice enough car to justify those running costs. This is a nice enough car to justify those running costs. It's lovely. It's incredibly refined. It's inherently practical. It's a brilliant car. If you're looking for a reliable daily driver, which you can get some performance out of, but you can also take to the garden centre, which is where we're going now, by the way. The Volvo 940 will not do you wrong. It's a really genuinely quite impressive car, and you can find these things for cheap. An awful lot of old people have these. An awful lot of old people maintain these things incredibly well. So if you can find an old boy who's selling his old Volvo and it's been maintained properly, go for it. Mechanical issues, anecdotally, I have had absolutely zero. Electrical issues, the rear lights have a mind of their own and constantly blow. Every week there will be a bulb go in this, but you know what? There'll be something wrong with the car, probably water ingress, but it's such a minor issue. You know, you just have to purchase new lights occasionally. Really is a car that I'm very proud to have owned and to have access to again. And it's a car that, if my brother ever comes to sell, I will happily purchase off him again because it has been absolutely fantastic. The garden centre's closed. It's been a staunch ally. I guess we're off to B&Q. As a little bit of a teaser for a later video, I must say that the estate car is not the most practical body form as lots of people say it is. No. The estate car is not the coolest. Don't get me wrong, they're great, and you typically, with the big engine bay, have a fair amount of room to work on them, but they are not as good as the underappreciated, much maligned body type of the MPV. Coming soon to CaiKeys, the incredible Japanese 3.5 litre V6 MPV. I'll leave you to speculate what vehicle that may be, but that'll be coming in the next few months if all goes to plan. So the Volvo 940, there we have it. It's an incredible car. It's great. There's nothing really that I can say against this thing. I try and provide a balanced view of vehicles. I say positives and negatives, but there's not really any negatives. This car, what you see is what you get. You look on the outside and you see an incredibly practical brick, and that's what you get, an incredibly practical brick. The Volvo stereotypes hold true. These things are comfortable, these things are reliable, these things are admittedly fairly thirsty, though not as bad as you'd think. But check out some of the guys who mod their Volvo 940. Some people do incredible things to these vehicles. The amount of power that you can get out of these things is genuinely incredibly impressive. This is a stock 940, as I said. We've not had anything done to this, so this is a review of the 940 as yours will be if you purchase one. Nothing done to it. Hello. The CaiKeys stock Volvo 940. Hi, are you alright?
Yeah.
Good. Garden centre's closed. So there you have it. The Volvo 940 is a truly unobjectionable car. Built tough, reliable, and with the potential of achieving silly power. But this 940 is more than that. It was my 940 and it's still a member of the family. It took me to work and back, it took me down to London to stand in a queue outside a church for half a day, and it took me to Snowdonia where I almost froze to death. And it's been a staunch ally when moving octogenarian's furniture out of my new house. And now it's my brother's, ferrying him to university and back in comfort and in relative dryness. Our 940 has been on the road for 29 years, and I'd like to think that it's got a hell of a lot of life left. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you again for the next review.